All right. Hello, welcome to our 80th episode of 365 Days Towards Racial Change. My name is Tomlins Nyback. We're here discussing uh, how Black lives matter and live in America. Also, dissecting white um, involvement in that life. Much of our motivation and discussion comes from slavery and how that has impacted and possibly uh, left a permanent scar on the Black community. So, in saying that, I'm finding that two issues are becoming evident as we continue this project. First issue has two parts: is does the Black involvement with slavery continue from generation to generation? Is it being passed down and passed along to our children, uh, emotionally, mentally? There definitely seems to be an economic impact of slavery on Black America. And then the flip side of that is, does white entitlement, privilege, expectation of favor prevail from generation to generation? Is that being passed along to white descendants? Um, I think you know my answer to both those ideas, but we're just trying to walk through objectively about those issues here in Black and white life in America. And secondly, as I have a burden that Black folks start to understand and play the economic game in America properly. We need financial literacy, education, and we need to understand how we're still being impacted um, financially. Let's take moral restraints, right or wrong, of slavery out of the picture, and just house our um, life in America in economic terms, purely economic terms, very objectively. And I think we'll find that there are organizations, attitudes in place that keep us from breaking through. There seems to be a ceiling, a cap on Black lives. And unless you can really make it as an entertainer, um, Black entertainer in America, that's sports, talk show, game shows, commercials, then you're really you're not looking at a whole lot of hope as far as participating in the wealth and resources of such a rich nation. I'm inspired by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. I'll YouTube his videos. He's much more articulate. Once I started listening to his work, I knew that that's what I've been looking for. That's what I've been trying to articulate to people about my feelings about how much harder I have to work to break through and access areas of wealth and prosperity in America. I read three of his works: A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You've Never Thought to Ask. We come out of there throughout the year with 101 questions. You can probably guess that a third of the year, upwards of a third of the year, will be spent coming out of that book. Today we're coming out of Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice. Very important issues and discussions in that book that we're coming out of. And finally, I read his national plan to empower Black America, Powernomics. You can find Dr. Anderson more of his work at powernomics.com. He's also involved with the Heritage Institute in DC. Behind me, you'll see hashtag us too. That's Black women essentially conversing there, getting networking, getting their needs met. You can also find Blag Enough, BLAGGENUF, kind of a Black Facebook. And if you've got an entrepreneurial mind, you go check out Dr. Boyce Watkins at theblackbusinessschool.com. Today we're going to jump right into it on day 80 here at 365 Days Towards Racial Change. We're talking about conservative forces, how conservatism is a tool for those in power, those elite, mostly white, some Black. You know, remember, before the Civil War, I got to find out the exact reference to the statistic, but there were a couple thousand Black individuals owned slaves. The institution had been normalized that much. So yes, we're going to find Blacks very much interested in keeping the status quo, so to speak, even if it means keeping other Blacks oppressed and vulnerable. So we're talking about the ism, conservatism, you know, alcoholism, and ism is it's a prevailing condition, and conservatism does exist here strongly in America. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm not talking about liberals and conservatives up on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. You know, we talk about politics, but always remember you notice politics and politicians, they're in league with where the wind is blowing the strongest, where they're getting the most support. So these lines, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservative, middle line, Tea Party, forget about it. Forget about it. They're in power. This just happens to be our name. If you think about slavery and the proliferation of power and control, if we could extract the color from the equation in America, this color line, you would still have a group of power, elite, privileged people oppressing another group with lesser means and keeping them locked in there. You know, the color is just the excuse. It's the wrapper on man's excuse justification of hurting another man. Never thinking that it has to be this way where Blacks are subjugated, so to speak. So my angst and my pressure, you know, I feel the angst and pressure in America. You know, when I try to break out, I've seen it in the workplace when I've tried to speak out and make some adjustments, get my needs met, where others, white mostly, were able to just go on and on. I know I've been discriminated against for employment, all these things. So fortunately, I ran into Dr. Anderson's work, and he articulates clearly what I've been feeling in America. I'm finding the more I educate myself with financial literacy, these videos are helpful for me. I'm able to get some relief to some of the challenges that I'm facing in America. I want to start out with a story. A Christian woman I used to live with, we rented a room from. And it was a trying time in my life, I'll just say, I made a lot of poor decisions in life that puts me in the position where I have to submit to a lot of institutions and powers. But now, as I educate myself, stay off of drugs and alcohol, gaining more momentum and power to have more control over my life. But this Christian woman, lived in our space, and she rented out multiple rooms. It was a real estate model, and in this model, I realized, she's got her hot tub, cable, internet, like all these amenities around her, and I realized that we were paying her way. Like she had positioned herself, you know, in such a way that she was a kind of slave master in this space. And I was the only black person, but a lot of these white people, well, we're all going out into our fields and bringing back resources, serving them up to her. And this bothered me a whole lot. I think it began the turning point of me trying to seek out this this mysterious and invisible angst, this power in the world that I couldn't penetrate, that was keeping me confined and held down and held in. And so at least now I can move about. I'm not out of the woods. And having said that, is that the goal in America? Is that capitalism? To position oneself in such a way where everybody else is paying my bills. I got problems with that. See, I'm from the idealistic vein of America. I listened in classrooms and about all of the altruism, but now a lot of that's being dismantled as I realize, if I follow the money, then I understand slavery in America. If I follow the money, I understand the displacement of Native Americans. When I follow the money, I understand how white Europeans are more acceptable in immigration than darker peoples in America. Uh, it's not to help one fleeing persecution so much, from civil war, religious persecution, all those things, all those little stories they told us, Plymouth Rock and Thanksgiving, first Thanksgiving, where the settlers. No, man, they discovered free wealth of resources on the other side of the ocean. And when you take the Revolutionary War, it wasn't because some king over there was this taxation and all that. Because once America broke those bonds from across the Atlantic Ocean, then it turned around and oppressed black people in the same way. It had already started displacing the Native Americans. So, it's a money thing. And, so my philosophical question for myself, am I obligated? Right now I'm coerced to go out and labor and have to manage my money. I see very little control of my own resources from that end. But then am I coerced? Is the only other alternative to be some type of slumlord land master, where I am just raping others for their time and resources, so I can sit and just sign papers and manage this estate that's generating all this uh, wealth for me, but at the cost of another human being's sweat, labor, you know, and whatnot. Is that the nuts and bolts of America? You know, it's not the America I was taught. It's the America I'm learning exists and holds sway and is very powerful in the world. But it's not the America that I was taught. So I've got to go through a little journey here. What will my ethics be when I have strong feelings about taking advantage of people to some infinite degree where they're all used up, but I'm okay? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I have I got family members and I've got friends who are perfectly fine with how they're making it in America. I don't like it. I don't like it. So that's her. So the conservatism I want to talk about is more general. Conserve, groups conserving, holding on to, keeping the status quo. It's the conservatism, regardless of party, associations, whatever. It's the conservatism that wants to prevent or impede another individual's progress in America, another individual's desire to step up and out of into their truth is um, is hampered, hobbled by other powerful forces. And this could be it happens in a lot of ways. Real estate's the most it's the most visible way. If you look at any high-rise building, a tenement, a house that's being rented, that's essentially the slavery model. Just the tenants have more sway. They're not whipped if they don't produce. They're not held hostage. If they don't pay up, they just get kicked out. That's one of the most visible ways. What I think about other policies are policies around insurance. Our latest policy, Obama's biggest mistake with forcing Americans to pay for medical care. I'm totally against that. I wish I had been more active and more aware of what that law really meant, because it's unfair to me, and it's unfair to me because the community, I'm putting they want me to put my money into this pot with individuals that dislike me, and they want me to put this money into the pot with what little white children who have legitimate medical needs. But how much, I'm not seeing that. I don't go to the doctor like that. I try to keep myself kind of together. I can take a lot of pain and whatnot. That's upwards of another $2,400 a year that I could do something better with. And the law was so stupid because the only thing that happened, the government just doesn't pay attention. Well, it pays attention. I think everything is engineered. But they made a law, and the insurance companies quickly adjusted their rates. It wasn't. It was the most asinine thing that his administration did. He was doing all right. He came into a bad situation, and he tries to fix it with this super tax under the guise of health care for all. that's the kind of that's a measure of conservatism at work, right? You see, if I make a gas station, I could put gas stations all along the highway from California to New Jersey, and I can't tell people they have to buy my gas. You know, they have a choice. You know, and I don't tell them to prepay. You know, for gas, they have a choice whether to get gas. You know, now if they don't buy gas, then if there's competition, so there's other places to get gas. You know, they're going to have to buy gas, but I can't compel them to buy gas. That's what this healthcare thing is. You're compelling me to buy a product that I'm not even using. You know, I'd be in favor of a kind of a health fund, my own health fund, where I put money in and it be used in the stock market, which is what all these corporations do. You take any corporation, gasoline, healthcare, oh, municipalities, they all, banking especially, they all take that money, any excess. And there's creative financing, a whole lot of ways that they use that um, to increase gains through the stock market. All of them do. All of them do. Even uh, securities uh, businesses have play the stock market. Everybody's doing it, right? You know, and that's what I would be in favor of. You know, let me build a fund like that. Oh, and then if I don't use it, that money's mine. You know, not not given to a community that doesn't want me around, that shelters their children when I come near and stuff like that. It's crazy stuff. So, I think I've got off on a tangent, but that's the conservatism we're talking about tonight. Now, it's especially damaging the blacks because we're already compromised, vulnerable, marginalized, lack access. Um, so when these things, the healthcare thing with Obama, oh, the car insurance, there's a lot of things I feel like if it's going to be a law, then the government should totally pay for it, and the citizens just have the obligation to be responsible in that space. That's the kind of government I would have. That would be more equitable, not forcing me to live other than, in a way, other than my desires. Okay, America's not as free. The world's got it really twisted up. America's not as free as uh, people think it is. It's really not. Um, Finally, we're hearing more the word reparations from white folks in politics. I hope they're not just blowing smoke and mirrors at us just to get votes, because this is a very serious issue. This is very real. It's a long time coming, and you get especially enough black folks really with some expectations on that, they have going to have an obligation to come through on a promise if they are elected to some office. So, and I mentioned reparations in the context of conservatism because I think this usurious way of capitalism is finally touching on every year less and less people are controlling more and more of the wealth of America, and that's finally hitting home. Us black folks have lived under that. Um, we know how to cope and massage our lives to compensate for the inequities in American society. But you take white folks with privilege, expectation of favor, and things like that. Then you got as that becomes encroached upon, you have um, then you have white people getting concerned, and all of a sudden they're ready to help out and speak the language of an oppressed black group in America. You know, yeah, I mean, you think like look at our mass shootings. You know, these white men that go and shoot up a place because they're feeling disenfranchised. They've lived in Candyland, Toyland, and fairy tale. They don't know how to hear the word no and stuff like that. Suddenly, um, they find themselves outside of privilege, power, expectation of favor. You know, and all of a sudden they go crazy. They don't know what to do, and they want to shoot up the place. You know, not so with any other group. You know, this conversation that New Zealand just had its recent massacre, and uh, white nationalism. That term came to the fore in American journalism, and that's a good term, because it's white men expecting to stay and be on top. And I tell you what, you start encroaching on that, you're going to see a whole different kind of America going on. They'll be exposed, they'll be outed for their true intentions, what's really on their minds for uh, their real intent towards other peoples in America when it comes to really sharing. Um, there's no patriotism and all of this, some of the glorious bullcrap that they've fed Americans that I was educated on growing up. It's so foolish. You know, it was a nice tool to keep me naive and keep my mind clouded. Oh boy, when I get in position, I'm going to participate just like all the rest. Not so. Not so. Dr. Anderson points out that neither political party under any banner has done anything for black folks uh, in a real tangible way. Um, it's a deep hole, I'm realistic. I'm not going to go to my grave seeing some sweeping change in the attitude uh, and the circumstances of black folks in America. But it starts right here in the grassroots, in the conversation, being realistic, open, being transparent, educating ourselves. Um, I'm listening to a lot of motivational speeches that echo that same thought. So you start somewhere. When I get my family going, I'm going to make sure that some way that kind of education is very apparent to the young minds of my children. Much like Alex Haley's tradition. They have that oral tradition that inspired him to write the book and go to Africa to find his original tribe and stuff like that. Conservatism, very real. Don't ever think that black people are coming and going freely. It takes a lot of energy and resources to get in the position of our entertainers, our commercial stars on commercials, talk show hosts and whatnot. A lot of energy, and those black folks are extremely few. Conservatism. That's day 80, 365 days towards racial change, and we're moving right along. I'll see you tomorrow.